I figured I'd share it here to see if I was actually in the wrong, or if my friends were just being unreasonable. For some background, I'm a 27-year-old guy, and my group of friends, let's call them Steve, Emma, Chris, Katie, and Jess, have been pretty close for a while now. We've been through all kinds of things together, from college struggles to first jobs to breakups, you name it. We have this tradition of going out for dinner every now and then, usually once a month. Normally, it's a pretty casual event, and we have a great time. But this time, it kind of went sideways. It was Jess's idea to go to this particular restaurant. She had been raving about it for weeks. It's this fancy spot downtown, known for its great food but also pretty steep prices. I didn't really care much where we went after all. It was meant to be a fun night out with friends, but I wasn't exactly thrilled about the price tag. See, I'd just gotten hit with an unexpected car repair bill earlier that week, and my budget for the month was a bit tight. But I figured, what the hell, I'll just get something light. So, we get to the restaurant, and it's as fancy as advertised. The kind of place where there are cloth napkins folded all fancy-like, and the menu doesn't even have prices for some of the dishes. You just have to assume you're getting something premium. Immediately, I start glancing through the appetizer section. I didn't want to be that guy who orders just water, but I also didn't want to end up spending $70 on a dinner I wasn't that hungry for. I settled on a small appetizer, some kind of crispy calamari dish and a soda. Simple, light, nothing that would make my wallet cry. In total, it came to about $15. Meanwhile, my friends were clearly in a celebratory mood. Jess and Katie ordered cocktails that looked like they had small gardens growing in them. Steve went for a steak that looked like it had come straight from a magazine, and Chris ordered a bunch of different things: appetizers, a main course, and, of course, an overpriced glass of wine. Emma got a seafood platter that came with a tiny candlelit stand and all. It was clear that everyone was going all out, and hey, more power to them. I didn't mind at all, I just wasn't on that vibe. We were chatting, laughing, just generally enjoying the night, and I thought everything was cool. I wasn't eating much, but I was definitely enjoying being there. We talked about random stuff: work stress, the latest Marvel movie, who was dating whom. The vibe was good, and I was genuinely having a nice time. The food arrived, everyone dug in, and there was a lot of passing plates around, everyone trying each other's dishes. It's always been one of my favorite parts about hanging out with this group. No pretenses, just good company. But then, the check came. The waiter set down that ominous black folder right in the middle of the table. I always feel a little awkward at this moment, not because I don't want to pay, but just because I know it can get complicated. My plan was straightforward. I'd pay for my calamari and drink, tip the waiter well, and be done. I reached for my wallet as soon as the bill landed. Before I could say anything, though, Chris, who's usually pretty easygoing, made a suggestion. He said, "Let's just split it evenly, guys. It's easier that way." Now, if we had all gotten similar things, I wouldn't have had an issue with that. But I could already tell that splitting evenly was going to cost me way more than what I'd actually ordered. I glanced at the receipt as it was passed around. The total bill was around $300. Doing some quick mental math, that meant I'd end up paying around $50 instead of my actual $15, and I wasn't exactly comfortable with that. I spoke up. I said, "Hey, I only ordered an appetizer and a drink, so I'd rather just pay for my share if that's cool." I tried to say it casually, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. I figured everyone would understand. I mean, it was clear that my order was a fraction of what others had gotten. Steve and Emma nodded and were like, "Yeah, no problem." But then Katie and Jess gave me a look, one of those really kind of looks. Jess, especially, seemed annoyed. She sighed and said something like, "It's just easier if we split it evenly, you know. It's not that big of a deal." I stayed firm but tried to keep it light. I smiled and said, "I get that, but I really didn't get much tonight, and I'm kind of on a budget right now. I'd just prefer to pay for what I actually ordered." There was a moment of awkward silence. Chris shrugged and said, "Whatever, man, do what you need to do." Katie, though, didn't seem ready to drop it. She muttered, "Honestly, it's just a few dollars, and it's kind of what friends do, you know, just split things. I tried not to let it bother me, but it definitely felt like she was calling me out. I didn't want to argue, so I just handed over my $20, said, "Here's for mine," and tried to move the conversation forward. Eventually, we figured out everyone's share, and I thought that was the end of it. After the bill was settled, I could tell that the vibe had shifted a bit. It wasn't as light and fun as before, and that sucked because I felt like I'd somehow ruined things just by wanting to pay my own way. Katie and Jess were a bit quieter, and Chris seemed kind of distant. I felt a mix of emotions: embarrassed for standing out, annoyed that I was being made to feel bad for being practical, and a little hurt that my friends thought I was being cheap over this. We left the restaurant, and everyone kind of split off after that. There wasn't the usual talk about where to go next or grabbing a drink at someone's place. I got an Uber home and tried to convince myself that I hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't want to pay triple what I ordered, and I shouldn't have to, right? But the story didn't end there. The next day, in our group chat, the topic came up again. Jess was the one who brought it up. She sent a message saying, "Hey, I just wanted to say that last night was kind of awkward. And I think we all need to make sure we're on the same page about splitting bills when we go out." Katie chimed in with, "Yeah, honestly, it was kind of a vibe killer to argue about a few dollars. We're all friends, it should be about the experience, not nitpicking over the bill." I read those messages and felt my stomach drop. I tried to explain myself again, saying that I wasn't comfortable paying so much more than what I'd ordered, especially since I hadn't been that hungry in the first place. I even said that I was sorry if I made things awkward, but that I thought it was fair for me to pay for what I got and nothing more. Katie responded with, "I get it, but when we go out as a group, it's just kind of understood that we split things. It makes everything smoother, and no one has to do math at the table. It's about the vibe, you know?" I felt like I was being ganged up on. Steve and Emma stayed out of it, and Chris just reacted with a thumbs up emoji to one of Katie's messages. I ended up not replying further, because I didn't want to escalate things. But honestly, I'm still thinking about it. I feel like I was put in an unfair position where either I paid a lot more than I should have, or I got labeled as the cheap friend who ruined the vibe. I've always been the kind of person who believes in fairness. If I had ordered the same as everyone else, I would have had no problem splitting the bill, but that wasn't the case here. I wasn't trying to be difficult or stingy, I just wanted to pay for what I actually consumed. But now I'm left wondering if I was in the wrong, or if I just have different expectations around these things than my friends do. So, after that whole incident, things were awkward for a while. I kept my distance from the group, not out of spite, but more because I felt like there was a kind of unspoken tension between us. It was that kind of situation where you're not sure if everything's okay or if people are still holding a grudge. I didn't want to push things and make it worse, but I also wasn't going to apologize again for something I genuinely believed wasn't wrong. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and the group chat started to pick up again. I was feeling hopeful maybe everyone had moved on, and we could just get back to how things were before. Steve and Emma were sharing memes. Jess was talking about her new job, and it felt like we were finally starting to click back into our old rhythm. It was a relief, honestly. I missed the group, and I missed hanging out with my friends without feeling judged or awkward. A few days later, Jess suggested that we do another dinner night, and my stomach dropped a little. I wasn't sure I was ready to go through another billing fiasco, but I figured that maybe things would be different this time. After all, we'd talked about it in the group chat, and they knew where I stood. I thought, maybe they understood my perspective now, and there wouldn't be any hard feelings if I chose to pay my share again. The restaurant Jess chose this time was another upscale one, and while I wasn't exactly excited about the prices, I decided to go anyway. I thought it was important to show that I was still willing to be part of the group, that I wasn't holding a grudge or anything. I even convinced myself that this dinner could be a fresh start, no drama, just friends enjoying a nice meal together. I tried to be optimistic about it. We arrived at the restaurant, and right off the bat, I could tell that everyone was in a celebratory mood again. The place was definitely a step up from our usual spots: dim lighting, candles, that kind of ambience that screams, get ready to spend some serious cash. We were seated at a big round table, and everyone started looking at the menu. I was scanning for something affordable, something light, just like last time. I ended up going for a small pasta dish and a glass of water. My order was around $20 tops. On the other hand, my friends seemed to be on a completely different wavelength. Steve ordered some fancy steak again, just got a seafood platter that looked like it could feed an entire family. Katie and Emma were debating over which bottle of wine to get, and eventually, they ordered a bottle for the table. Chris, as usual, was ordering a bit of everything: appetizers, a main course, and dessert. I stayed quiet and smiled along, trying not to feel out of place. I wanted to have a good time, and I didn't want to be the odd one out. Dinner went on, and honestly, it was fun. We laughed, we talked, we caught up on each other's lives. I really thought this time, things were going to end on a good note. When the food came, everyone shared bites again, and it felt like old times. My anxiety about the bill was in the back of my mind, but I tried my best not to let it show. I didn't want to ruin the evening by bringing up money, and I convinced myself that it wouldn't be an issue. Surely my friends wouldn't expect me to pay the same amount as them when I clearly hadn't ordered the same. Eventually, the waiter brought the check, and I could feel the tension rise within me. I wanted to believe it would be different this time. I wanted to believe my friends would understand. Chris grabbed the bill and gave it a quick glance, and before I could even think about speaking up, he said, "All right, let's just split it evenly again, guys." I froze for a moment, hoping that maybe someone would speak up for me, maybe Emma or Steve, since they'd seemed understanding last time. But, to my dismay, everyone just nodded along. It was like déjà vu, except this time, I knew what was coming. I took a deep breath and said, trying to keep my tone as light as possible, "Actually, I think I'd prefer to just pay for my own again. I really didn't get that much tonight, so it wouldn't be fair for me to split evenly." The moment I said it, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Katie sighed loudly, and Jess rolled her eyes. Chris, who still had the bill in his hands, looked at me with this exasperated expression. He said, "Dude, come on, we've talked about this. It's just easier to split it evenly. We're all friends here, it's not a big deal." Katie chimed in, "Yeah, honestly, let's not ruin the vibe again. It's just a few extra dollars. We're here to have a good time, not to nitpick over the check." I could feel my face getting hot, and I was caught between wanting to stand my ground and not wanting to make a scene. I glanced at Steve and Emma, hoping they'd back me up, but they both just kind of looked down at their hands, clearly not wanting to get involved. I swallowed and said, "Look, it's not about the money, it's just that I didn't order as much as everyone else. I'm happy to pay for what I got, but splitting it evenly means I'm paying more than double what I actually ordered." Jess, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. She looked right at me and said, "You're really going to do this again? We're all trying to have a nice night, and you're making it awkward. It's just what we do as friends. We split it, and no one has to worry about it. You're kind of ruining the vibe right now." I felt a lump form in my throat. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, and it was like I was back in high school, being called out in front of the class. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to just walk out, but I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't want to be that guy who storms out and makes everything dramatic. I just wanted to be treated fairly, but at that moment, it felt like I was alone in that. Chris then added, in a more firm tone, "Look, man, we're all just trying to make this easy. We're not asking for a lot here, just split it evenly, and let's move on, please." I could feel my resolve crumbling. I didn't want to fight with my friends, and I didn't want to be the one who ruined the vibe again. I sighed, defeated, and finally said, "Fine, I'll pay the split." Katie smiled, almost as if nothing had happened, and said, "Great. See, that wasn't so hard." Jess nodded, and Chris gave a quick nod of approval. I watched as Chris calculated how much we each owed, and I pulled out my card, trying to keep my face neutral, even though I felt like my insides were twisting. When the waiter came by, we all handed over our cards, and I paid my share $55, when my actual meal had been $20. I sat there, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was fuming. I felt like I had been forced into something I didn't agree with, just to keep the peace. The rest of the group seemed completely unbothered, like nothing had happened, and they moved on with their conversations. I tried to join in, but I couldn't shake the feeling of resentment building up inside me. When we finally left the restaurant, everyone was making plans to grab a drink at a nearby bar, but I made an excuse about having an early morning and called an Uber instead. I couldn't do it. I couldn't pretend like everything was okay when I felt so disrespected. I didn't want to blow up at them, but I also didn't want to sit there and let my frustration simmer any longer. I needed space. In the Uber ride home, I replayed everything in my head, wondering if I was really the one in the wrong. Was I just being stubborn? Was it really that unreasonable to want to pay for what I actually ordered? I couldn't help but feel hurt that my friends, people I'd known for years, couldn't see where I was coming from. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. I just didn't think it was fair for me to pay for everyone else's expensive meals when I clearly hadn't ordered the same. When I got home, I sat on my couch, staring at my phone. The group chat was already buzzing with messages, photos from the bar, jokes, more plans. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I felt like I didn't belong, like I was somehow on the outside of this group I'd always considered my closest friends. They didn't understand me, and worse, they didn't seem to care to try. After that dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling of frustration. I spent the entire weekend going back and forth in my mind, wondering if I was truly the unreasonable one or if I just had different expectations from my friends. I didn't hear much from them until the next day when a notification from our group chat popped up. It was Katie. She'd sent a photo of them at the bar, captioned, "Last night was awesome. Glad we didn't have any drama over the bill this time." The message hit me like a punch to the gut. It was like she was throwing it in my face, as if my wanting to pay my fair share was some kind of nuisance that they were finally free from. I watched as Steve, Jess, and Chris all liked the message. Steve replied with, "Yeah, glad we all got to relax for once," and Jess added, "100%, no stress, just vibes." I didn't reply. I just stared at my phone, feeling that familiar weight in my chest. It was so unfair. They genuinely thought I was the problem. That my wanting to pay for what I actually ordered was somehow ruining their fun. I wasn't being stingy. I wasn't trying to make things difficult. I just didn't want to be taken advantage of. After a lot of stewing over it, I decided that I needed to make them understand what it felt like to be in my shoes. Maybe if they experienced the unfairness themselves, they'd finally get why I was so uncomfortable splitting the bill equally when we all ordered so differently. I knew it was a bit petty, but honestly, I was at my wit's end, and I felt like nothing else had worked. So, the next week, I decided to invite them out to dinner myself. I chose a restaurant that I knew would have options ranging from very reasonable to quite expensive. It wasn't some ultra-fancy place, but definitely somewhere we could all find something good. I posted in the group chat, "Hey, how about we all grab dinner on Friday? My treat to pick the place this time." They were all down, and Jess even commented, "Oh, it's been a while since you picked a spot." "I'm in," everyone else quickly agreed, and I started planning. I knew what I was going to do, and I was determined to see it through. Friday came around, and we all met up at the restaurant. I was nervous but tried not to show it. I kept up the small talk as we walked in and got seated, hoping my nerves wouldn't betray my plan. Once we got our menus, I immediately zeroed in on the most expensive items. There was a steak on there that was almost $60 by itself, and I also eyed a couple of appetizers, plus a dessert and a cocktail. I knew it was excessive, but I had a point to make. Steve noticed and looked over at me with a raised eyebrow. "Whoa, you're going all out tonight, huh?" he said with a half smile. I grinned back at him, keeping my voice casual. "Yeah, why not? Been a long week, I deserve a treat," I said, shrugging it off. Katie, who was sitting across from me, chimed in, "Are you sure, though? I mean, that's a lot. It's not like you to go for the expensive stuff." I waved them off, playing it cool. "It's fine, seriously. I just feel like splurging tonight." Everyone else stuck to their usual style, one entree each, maybe an appetizer or two to share. They all ordered modestly, but I kept piling things on. 2 appetizers, the steak, a side dish, a fancy cocktail, and a slice of cheesecake for dessert. It was almost embarrassing, but I was determined to follow through. I tried to keep up the friendly banter as the night went on, but my mind kept coming back to the bill. When the food came, we all dug in, and I even offered people bites of the appetizers, trying to keep everything feeling as normal as possible. The conversation was flowing, and I could tell that everyone was having a good time. Part of me almost felt guilty, but I reminded myself that I wasn't doing this for no reason. I needed them to understand how unfair it felt to be forced into paying more than my share. Finally, when we were all done and the waiter brought the check, I didn't hesitate. I reached for it before anyone else could, opening the billfold and glancing at the total. It was a little over $200, most of that was my order. I cleared my throat, plastering on a smile. All right, guys, let's just split it evenly. Yeah, makes it easier for everyone. I shrugged, trying to keep my tone light. Come on, guys, we're all friends here, right? We're not going to make it complicated by calculating who owes what. Let's just split it evenly and keep the vibe going. Katie stared at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. But your food was, like, the same cost as what we all got combined. It doesn't really make sense for us to split it evenly, does it? I could tell she was trying to be polite, but there was a definite edge to her voice. I just smiled back, keeping my tone casual but firm. Hey, last time we split the bill evenly, even though I didn't get much. You guys said it was about keeping things simple, about the vibe, right? I'm just following the same logic here. There was a long, awkward silence. Jess looked like she wanted to say something, but she just pressed her lips together, glancing around the table. Steve looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Finally, Katie sighed heavily. Fine, whatever. Let's just split it, she said, her voice dripping with irritation. I could feel the tension at the table as everyone reluctantly nodded. Chris pulled out his phone, doing the quick math for everyone's share. When he told them how much it was, over $50 each, everyone's expression soured. I knew they weren't happy about it, but I was determined to see this through. I handed over my card, along with the others, and we paid. The rest of the night was awkward, to say the least. We all made our way out of the restaurant, and I could tell that the vibe was completely different from earlier. No one was making plans for a bar or drinks afterward. Instead, everyone just sort of mumbled their goodbyes, clearly eager to leave. I got into my car, feeling a mix of satisfaction and regret. I knew I'd made my point, but I also knew I'd probably pissed everyone off in the process. Later that night, I got a notification from the group chat. It was Jess. She wrote, "Hey, so, can we all agree that no one pulls that kind of stunt again? If you want to pay for what you ordered, just say so upfront." This wasn't cool, and it felt like you were trying to prove something. Katie quickly followed up, "Yeah, I don't know what that was about, but it sucked. If you want to pay your own way, fine. Just don't drag the rest of us into some kind of point-making exercise." I read the messages, and felt a little guilty. Maybe I'd gone too far. But I also felt like they finally understood a little bit of what I'd been feeling, how unfair it was to be pressured into paying more than my share, just because it was easier for everyone else. I decided not to reply right away. I needed time to cool off, to really think about how I wanted to handle things moving forward. The next day, I finally replied, "I'm sorry if it felt like I was trying to make a point. I just wanted you guys to understand how I felt last time. I didn't mean for it to come off like that, but I felt like no one was really hearing me. From now on, I'm happy to just pay for what I order, and I won't make a fuss about it. I hope we can move past this." There was a pause in the chat, and eventually, Chris replied, "All right, let's just call it even and move on. No more surprises, okay?" Katie and Jess liked the message, and Steve added, "Fair enough. Let's just keep things chill from here on out." For a moment, no one said anything. They all just looked at me, and I could see the confusion starting to settle in. Chris finally spoke up. Dude, I mean, you ordered way more than the rest of us. Maybe we should just pay for what we got." He had this nervous chuckle, like he wasn't quite sure if I was serious. So, Reddit, was I wrong for not wanting to split the bill evenly? Should I have just sucked it up and paid the $50 to keep the peace, even though I only ordered $15 worth of food? I hate that this small thing has caused tension with my friends, but I also don't think it's fair for me to subsidize everyone else's expensive meals just because they wanted to have a fancy night out.